Hey guys, what's happening? So we're back with more Carnage, where now we finally see the Cletus from Carnage Reigns go toe to toe with God Carnage. And in this one where we find out what each of them had planned for the other, I gotta admit, it kinda surprised me. So let's talk about it. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so coming back, we start out with another live stream with the conspiracy theorist Travis Brookfields, who's one of the people online that Flash has been following, since a number of the influencers are sharing the information that the police refuse to give to the public. But after Travis shares a quick word from his video sponsor, which I ain't mad at cause you gotta pay the bills, he goes on to expose that another one of the missing apostles has been discovered, where in this case Thomas happens to be a woman by the name of Eva Thomas, who was found murdered with the numbers carved into her back. And in Travis's report, he mentions that Thomas and John were the last two apostles, though like we saw before, it still says, where's Peter, where's John? But for the time being, with the focus mainly being on John, after the murder of Eva Thomas, Travis Brookfields points out that this seems like it's a call to action, as if Carnage were asking the people to do something, though he's not exactly sure what that something is. And right now for Flash, who's piecing together as much as he can between the news and what he's finding on social media, to him it feels like he's getting sucked into this crazy puzzle or some sort of game that there's no winning to when it comes down to it, so really he just wants to end it. But it's right here where he sees a reel where some woman has figured out that the second letter of all the words on the glass tomb spell out find him, kill him, which now revealed the call to action that Travis Brookfields was talking about during his live stream. But as soon as Flash sees this, he gets a call from Liz Allen, who's following up to fill him in as far as what she discovered in the blood samples that he gave her back in issue 2. And as it turns out, he was right, because the blood that was used to draw this symbol came from 13 different sources, and the last two are Flash Thompson and John Statler Baker, which now implicates Flash to these murders. So he ends up asking Liz to give him at least 24 hours before she takes this to the police, which at first has Liz like, well, I don't know, just want to do the right thing, which then has Flash like, well, since when was Alchemax so righteous and all about doing the right thing? Which in Liz's case, she is trying to make Alchemax better, which is part of the overarching story that's taking place in Cult of Carnage Misery. But right now, Flash is just asking her to give him a day. He's not asking her to stop, so he tells her to just give him one day, and after that, she can do whatever she feels like she needs to do. And next, we go back to the Carnage Symbiot, who's now brought his new Cletus Kasady to meet the original Cletus Kasady. And for the original Cletus Kasady, prior to issue 2, the last time that we saw him was during Carnage Reigns, where at the end of that event, all we knew is that this puddle of him survived, which meant that he'd be back soon. So now when we see him looking very human and walking down this pile of bodies, it's almost like it insinuates that very gruesome measures were taken to get him whole again. But much like we saw in the last issue, Cletus number 2 asks Cletus number 1, what's the difference between a madman and the prophet? And Cletus number 1 tells him, it's the audience. So the next question he asks is, can you judge a god by their audience? And Cletus number 1 tells him, let's bloody hope not, for the sake of the gods. And then the original Cletus asks, what's this about? Would you like to be a god or a god butcher? As he's then told, would it not take one to do the other? But for Cletus, with him seeing these two, he calls them both silly. The Carnage Symbiot and his quote-unquote imitation. And the original Cletus lets him know that he felt him enter the world, and he knew eventually he'd come for him. So Cletus number 2 tells him, of course you did, I knew you would. We're the same, remember? And the original Cletus tells him, we're not. You're a copy of me, flawed by the limitations of its maker, the limitations of Carnage. And with him saying this now causes Carnage to make its way into the conversation, almost as if the imitation has said enough. Because Carnage just tells the original Cletus, don't be mean, only for Cletus to then let him know that he's not impressed, because he left the Carnage Symbiot, which right there just goes back to the story we were given in the previous Carnage run, when we found out the how and why the two of these guys went their separate ways, with Cletus moving on with the Extrembiote, while the Carnage Symbiot went on to act out Cletus's plan to steal additional powers and abilities, and eventually become a god as they originally intended. But now with the Carnage Symbiot coming back to Earth and seeing the original Cletus in the state that he's in, Carnage is pretty much like, don't tell me who's not impressed, cause look at you, you can barely walk. But as it turns out, there's a bit more going on with Cletus Kasady than Carnage is aware of at the moment. And the same could be said the other way around, but they both get educated rather quickly here, because as it turns out, Cletus was leading Carnage to a gas line that he just opens up and ignites with the lighter, which doesn't really do anything to the Carnage Symbiot, because like we've seen, he's already gotten rid of his weakness to fire. But in a way, it almost seems like Cletus was testing Carnage to see what kind of progress he made on his god-killing field trip, which now confirms that Carnage is immune to fire. And then next, Cletus provokes Carnage by telling him what does it say about a god butcher if he can't kill an old man. So Carnage just eats him, but when he does, it just starts burning like crazy. And at first it's confusing for Carnage because he doesn't understand how Cletus was able to hurt him this bad. Because right now for Carnage, it feels like chewed up Cletus is just burning on the inside. So he just spits him back up, since holding him in was too painful. And in a way, it almost seems like Carnage feels disrespected because he tells Cletus like, you poisoned me. Almost like, how could you? And Cletus tells him, well, you tried to eat me, as I figured you would. But as it turns out, Cletus pumped himself full of concentrated antibodies, which were the closest thing he could get to anti-venom. And he tells Carnage, I thought it would kill you, but you are as hard to kill as me. Tell me, Carnage, if we are the gods, who are the devils? And from here, this is where things start to take a bit of an unexpected turn, because now the conversation goes back to Cletus number 1 and Cletus number 2, and it's not going to be that long of a conversation. But before we go forward, I want you guys to keep in mind that this second Cletus Kasady, this imposter if you will, he was created by the Carnage Symbiot as soon as he got back to Earth 616, just after the events of Death of the Venomverse, when we saw Carnage go back to Riker's Island, consume an inmate only to reform that guy's biomatter into this new version of Cletus Kasady, to where after that Carnage just filled in his mind with a ton of memories from Cletus's past, and from there they went on to catch up with the world that's changed since Carnage left. But even still, this whole time, this second Cletus, he's been the solution that Carnage has produced after going back and forth on the idea of whether he should even have a host. Because during Web of Carnage, when we saw the Carnage Symbiot ditch Jonathan Shade, it left him because they couldn't see eye to eye. So going forward, Carnage decided that he would be better off doing this by himself, which, I mean, from there it worked out very well for him. But after completing the original plan of Cletus Kasady, the original roadmap to godhood, the Carnage Symbiot was still incomplete, which then led him to Omnipotent City to get the answers to what was missing, which then led to the Lord Librarian telling Carnage that he was not asking the right questions. Questions like who prays to you, who worships you, but that last question was where is the rest of you, which is what led Carnage towards the creation of Cletus number 2, which Carnage did as a way for him to get the old Cletus back, the Cletus who didn't leave, the Cletus who didn't deviate from the plan, with Carnage realizing that he's incomplete without him. And this is why back in issue 1, we saw Cletus number 2 and the Carnage Symbiot consume each other, as it was said, in a way that was beyond your traditional bonding between a symbiote and a host, to where even though they're separate, they are still one. And I bring this back up because now, when the conversation goes back between Cletus number 1 and Cletus number 2, I want you guys to think of this as an old Cletus versus new Cletus conversation, which I know it sounds a bit convoluted with how it's done, but this series, and really more so this issue, it's serving the purpose of simplifying that going forward. Because right now, the original Cletus, he realizes that Carnage has been eliminating his vulnerabilities. So he asks the new Cletus, who, remember, new Cletus and Carnage are one, but he asks the new Cletus, what are you gonna do when you're all powerful? And the new Cletus tells him, whatever I want. Which for the OG Kasady, that's not how he gets down, because he's never been about just the easy kill. Because if he was, he'd just be out here slaughtering anything. Cows, rats, ants, whatever. But the new Kasady tells him, killing is more than the challenge. It's doing the thing everyone wants to do, but doesn't have the courage to. Which in a lot of ways is a very direct statement, coming from the version of Cletus that Carnage wants, and being spoken to the version of Cletus that Carnage needs. So going forward, they sliced the original Cletus's head open, while saying the human brain contains 110 milliliters of blood. I only need your brain. Not sure how long it'll take to bleed out your contaminated plasma, but I have time. The journey is the destination, you know? As the original Kasady goes on to say, well, F you, and Carnage tells him language, and by the way, I understood that reference. But going forward, the new Kasady tells the old one, don't think of it as dying. Think of it as coming home. Think of it as joining the cause, as they then eat the original Cletus's brain, and we're told the brain matter burns the symbiote's insides. It is a welcome pain. The man fights a losing fight. Because remember, this is not a choice that the original Cletus is willfully making, but it goes on to say Carnage absorbs what is left of him, his spirit, his logic, himself, to where from there we see Carnage say, "We are Carnage," as the new Cletus says, "Yes I am," and the show must go on, which right there just goes back to what we saw heading into Carnage Reigns, when the original Cletus Kasady spoke of the Cletus Kasady show, because now, as the Carnage Symbiot would have it, with absorbing the original Cletus Kasady, they're now whole. But because the original Cletus didn't come along willingly, it begs the question if Carnage made the right decision here, because we know somewhere out there's another piece of the Carnage Symbiot with the memories of Cletus Kasady that is still with Detective John Shade, and much like the original Cletus, it's not really a fan of Carnage. But from here we go back over to Flash, who's now seeing footage of someone going after another John, and it's here where he sees that other people, or copycats, have received the message that Carnage put out, telling them to find him and kill him. So with Flash now having the address to John Statler Baker, Flash rushes over to his home, knowing that this could possibly be a trap and Carnage might be there waiting for him. But as Flash makes his way over to John's home, we see Carnage just outside. And by way of Carnage bumping into this girl who's doing a late night jog, we're shown how close the time is between Carnage being there and when Flash shows up, as he then walks past this same girl. And as Flash makes his way to John Statler Baker's home, we see Carnage say, "I was prepared to wait, but he's right on time." Flash Thompson does his best imitation of an ordinary man. The symbiote disguises him well, gives him a costume, changes his fingerprints, shrinks his muscles into a non-threatening frame. Right on time. In a world of disappointment, Flash is not disappointing. His symbiote ears will hear what no one else does. Muffled and far away, yet still there, he will smell the faint scent of feces and blood, and he will want to do the right thing. And as Carnage is narrating this, we see Flash go inside and approach a door that has "Live, Laugh, Love" written in blood, as Flash hears the muffled sound of John Statler Baker on the other side. So Flash rushes in and he cuts on the light, and blam, it just kills this dude. Because as it turns out, Flash was set up so that him coming to save this guy is what actually killed him. And it's really messed up. And I can only imagine that this is gonna mess with Flash's head. Because earlier in this series, we saw when Liz told him not to go looking for trouble, it caused Flash to question himself on whether or not that's the type of person that he is. And I mean, at the time, Arya told him that's not the case, but now I can only imagine that Flash is gonna blame himself for this and just constantly think about what Liz said at the bar, as well as what she recently told him about just taking it to the police. So yeah, I don't know how Flash gonna recover from this one. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/Dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.